speaks to the diversity of the talent that is there. Because, I mean, look, if we're talking about human upliftment, good Lord, I mean, that is the ultimate thing, perhaps, whatever that might mean. That might mean things like, you know, social service activities, all the way to this phenomenal internal transformation into higher consciousness and things like that. It's a whole range of things. Like, it goes back to Maslow's hierarchy and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's social justice. It's
right.
Yes. It's yes.
It's got everything in there. So the structure we have is so broad that almost anything can fit in there that is related to the progression of humanity.
Yeah.
Almost anything can. I mean, from medical science to psychology to meditation.
Oh, well, yeah, art and literature.
Art, literature, poetry.
I mean, you know,
dance.
sometimes poetry is one of the most meditative experiences.
Exactly. You know, and so that's a very, it's a tremendous thing. And so to that effect, what I'd like to do today, if it is all right with you, I'm going to just show you something here.
Sure.
Some slides that I have been working on positive psychology, and see what you think of this. I mean, this is actually something that will eventually be part of the Angel Wing program. These are just all in rough draft right now. But if you go to this slide here, positive personal trait development. So there are 13 boxes here. And I thought it might be interesting, as we're talking about love and energy and healing and all of this, that maybe we can probe. I can pick your brain a little bit about personality, what your perspective is on that, and kind of ask you about these pieces that are in these boxes here, actually.
Yeah, I just, yeah, that's great. Let me just look at these boxes for a second.
Sure.
Okay, so 1 and 13 are two sides of the same coin.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So maybe what we can do, we can start our dialogue this way. If you hit your record button,
All right, wait a minute. My phone, was out of charge. So let me make sure I've got enough charge to use it.
That's fine. Otherwise, we'll just record it on here, which is all right too.
Okay, I'm good, but it's going to take me a moment now to set it up.
That's fine. Take your time. No problem.
So what do I need to do here? I need airplane mode on, and I need my speaker. You know, this whole thing about radical responsibility.
Yes.
Is getting a lot of, I'm just going to call it airplay right now.
Sure.
You know, it's kind of a buzz phrase for people to identify things. I don't know what, I lost the little, I haven't lost it. It just, I don't know where it is. The little,
Don't worry about it. I can do the recording on here, and it'll be a nice video recording actually. And so it's fine. So don't worry about it. If you cannot find it right now, it's nothing to worry about.
Okay. All right, good.
So there's no need to worry at all about that. Let me actually go in here, and which is good. Let's see, let's put this one up here. Okay, just like what we do over there. Take your time. And then I'm going to look up something on the internet here also. There's actually there's a lot of, you know, this whole question about personality, and you and I really haven't really touched upon that too much, and I thought that would be a nice segue to, because that's a major thing to really get into. what is meant by personality and all. So
Yeah, I know. And I don't feel really competent right now to give a definition of personality.
that's okay. You don't have to give a definition of it. I'll just kind of ask you some questions and see what comes up from there.
Okay.
So just go naturally. Don't worry about the technical language behind any of that, actually.
Okay.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, let me know.
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Welcome to the Angel Wing. My name is Sachin Karnik. I'm the first volunteer with the Angel Wing Quantum Transformation Program. Joining us today is Dr. Elizabeth Berman, who is a licensed psychologist in Wilmington, Delaware. And she has extensive experience in multiple areas within psychology, specifically positive psychology, energy psychology. She has great insights into the transformative potential of each person. So to that effect, I want to welcome Dr. Berman and welcome all of the people who are listening to this video podcast. The topic today is about positive personal trait development. So before we go into all of these boxes and the different ideas presented here, we want to try to understand from Dr. Berman a little bit more about personality. So I'll kind of make some initial comments and see where it goes from there. So when we use the word personality in the general parlance, that kind of refers to one's behavior, one's sense of oneself. Some people say I have a great personality, being very social. The word is used in those ways many times. But psychologically, it is, as I understand the word in psychology, that these are individual characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So these are pretty well established patterns within oneself. So, for example, if someone is narcissistic, so there's a sense of, the me has become very strong and is a lot of focus on oneself, as opposed to someone who has like a dependent personality. So all of these classifications are there. We won't go into all that right now. The general question for Dr. Berman is that there is a pattern that develops within our childhood, from childhood to teenage to young adulthood. And they say that usually around, age 18 onwards, 18 to 24 to 30, that's when a personality pattern predominates. There's a pattern that develops that's conditioned as part of one's identity, one's sense of oneself is there, but it's a way of thinking and feeling and perceiving the world, and all of that is part of what is meant by personality. At least that's one way to think about it. And then there's quite a bit involved in it, things like traits and all that. So before we get to any of that, what are some of your initial thoughts about what is meant just by the word personality? When you hear that word, what does that mean to you?
The word personality is another kind of big umbrella word,
Yes.
meaning, as you've alluded to, many things to different people. People who study personality, I think, probably have different definitions of it depending upon what field their background is.
Yes,
right?
yes,
So,
right.
social scientists, even within social sciences, there would be different kind of interpretations because of the way people are trained. But certainly from social sciences to the harder sciences, harder meaning maybe studying the neural networks in the brain experts would have a different understanding of what the word personality means based upon the tools that they use to study it, to examine it, to collect research, to generate hypotheses about what is personality and or how to change certain aspects of the personality. So given that, and that I'm as much influenced by that bias as anybody is, I can speak to it from my point of view. And for me, personality is the way in which the way we see the world and the way we respond to what we see as the world.
Yes.
So
Yes.
as you pointed out, maybe somebody is narcissistic and maybe even might identify themselves with that label. And I would hazard a guess that their sense of the world is there's not enough to go around, so I better get mine while I can. If somebody else gets too much, it's going to come off my plate. And that
Right.
sense of me first at all costs. Versus somebody, I can't remember, what was the other personality trait you mentioned?
I was mentioning about, just for example, dependent personality.
A dependent personality
Yes.
would, I would assume, be someone with a history who has been taught that they don't have enough personal power
Yeah.
or intelligence or skill to navigate the world in a way that will keep them safe and happy. And so they're always looking outside of themselves for someone to give them what they're perceiving they're missing in their life. So that's very general kind of way of saying it. But I think for me, the critical thing here is whether we're talking about personality, trait, or a state of people are talking now about the COVID has put us into a trance state. Some
Yeah.
people who teach meditation talk about being in the trance state, not even realizing that we have a body and that in this moment, certain things are happening in our brain and our body and our thoughts. And that the purpose of life, according to some people, is to awaken from this trance state, to
Right. Right.
come out of this kind of automatic knee-jerk functioning to everything, and to be aware of ourselves in such a way that we recognize in each moment we're in the moment. We're processing the information that our body, our brain, our mind is feeding us in this moment. And we recognize that at every moment there's a choice point. What part of this myriad of information am I going to respond to? Most of us go through most of the day not recognizing the fullness of our moment-to-moment experience, therefore
Exactly.
not recognizing that we have a choice what we're going to focus on, what we're going to say, if anything, what we're going to do in this moment, if anything. And so I would offer to you that the reason we end up this way is because the neural networks that are laid down in our brain, which
Yes.
interprets for us who am I? It gives
Yeah.
us information to try and answer the question, who am I? And what is this world about? And how do I interface or fit into the world in a way that makes me feel fulfilled, good, happy, fill in the blank of the adjective there.
Yes. Yes.
So the critical understanding that I have of what I just said is that for the most part, this, if you want to call it trance state of what we think the world is, mistaking our thoughts about the world for an actual, tangible, physical world out there, is that those neural networks, which tell us how to think about and respond to certain sensory input that come into us through our bodies and our
Yes.
brain, those are conditioned and laid down by our parents. It starts in utero in terms of what the mother is feeling, thinking, eating, doing while we're in the womb. Hence, a mother who is an alcoholic and is drinking her entire pregnancy.
Yes.
has a
Yes.
high probability of producing a child with a fetal alcohol syndrome who has a very different experience of the world than a mother who has a healthier pregnancy and the support to keep the fetus healthy while she's pregnant. And her thoughts and her moods, which are all a part of what's nurturing the cells that eventually create this whole human baby that's birthed at some point.
Yes.
That already is starting to go into our DNA. And then the messenger RNA in terms of the rest of the body and how that is going to be used. Certainly after we're born, the way people treat us, what people say to us, how they respond to us, lays down the foundation of what we think the world is and who we think we are. We're not even a who at the beginning, but the way
Right.
that the dominant people around us treat us. This is then picked up by authority figures in our spiritual traditions, in our educational traditions and institutions, in our, younger years, our school years, early school, middle school years, and then our peers as we get a bit older, like high school age, begin to start having an input. But really, the early building blocks of how we see the world and how we perceive ourselves are somebody else's paradigm. There's somebody else's opinion of what
Mhm.
the world is and who we are. And that's communicated to us by the way they treat us, what they say to us. A
Yes.
child who's always hearing, will you be quiet? Stop bothering me. I'm busy right now. Versus a child who's told, oh, sweetheart, what is it? What do you need right now? Let me see if I can help you. Even if that child learns to have some delay of gratification because the mother can't be 100% or the caregiver can't be 100% there for us. So that's kind of a brief summary of what I think about this huge question.
Yes.
Simple
Yes.
question.
So, yeah, so thank you for that nice overview and introduction. Generally, it is taught in psychology that there is a 5-factor model of personality. So personality traits are understood as patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that are relatively endure across an individual's lifespan. So this is interesting.
That are relatively what?
That relatively endure, that are
Oh,
relatively,
endure. I see.
yes. So
Yes. As opposed to a passing mood.
right, exactly. So personality traits are understood as patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that are relatively enduring across an individual's lifespan. And this is very interesting because part of what you were describing is the development of the personality structure in itself, which would mean that who we consider as who we are, our identity, our sense of me, is all part of that personality structure, or maybe the personality is part of the me.
It's a manifestation of who I think I am.
It's a manifestation of who I think I am as opposed to who I actually am. What do you say?
Well, I would say, and the reason I said who I think I am, because the mind is it's not all conscious.
Right.
So there are many aspects to the mind, and we can talk about consciousness being, let's just say we talk about the mind being a big circle, right?
Yes.
If we draw a line across the middle, everything above that is on a conscious level, everything below it is on an unconscious level. And the unconscious can be the subconscious, which is close to that line of surface awareness, but there's also deep unconscious, and if we really want to get into it, there's a collective unconscious in our mind, and then there's consciousness. And as we study the mind from different metaphysical traditions, we also begin to realize that we can be connected with something called a supra consciousness, which we'll get into at some point in this extended discussion. And so the thing is that so much of what's going on in our consciousness, what's been labeled the stream of consciousness, is in that subconscious realm. You know, it's an interesting exercise to say, even if you do it every 3 hours, set a timer for every 3 hours during your waking day. And when the timer goes off, to just stop and respond, you know, turn your timer off and ask yourself the question, what was I just thinking?
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, there's so many thoughts rushing through my mind all the time that I'm totally unaware of, right? In the moment they're registering, but it's so fast. The brain just wants to hurry up, get it in, move it on so it can get in something else, move it on, get it in something else. And that feeds that really, really rapid flow of thinking in our mind. Now, what I would say has happened in the past, I don't know, 20 plus years, is technology reached a point where they could start imaging the brain. And with the advent of real-time brain imagery, the science, in its method of proving or not proving something, has shown that, just a minute, I have a very active dog, hang on. Tommy, I'm recording. Sorry about that. My terrier was protecting me from the postman.
No problem, sure.
That they've come up with the term neuroplasticity.
Yes, exactly.
Lo and behold, we don't have a brain that's set in cement at some point in our life. We have a brain that we can reprogram if we think consciously and behave with conscious choice.
Right.
So that means this early programming, which told us we were, you know, going to be a great athlete, or we're going to be a wonderful wife and mother, or whatever we were told, because those were dreams of a different generation of our parents, or perhaps mentors. And we, you know, the kid, the young man who's told he's going to be a great athlete, and really what he wants to do is become a world famous chef. You know, how do you make that transition to become what your heart is longing to do, when for all these years people have been saying, you're a great athlete, you're going to do great athletic things? And then that becomes self-reinforcing, because whatever, we train as an athlete, we do whatever we do. So this notion of personality as an enduring lifelong trait, maybe not so much anymore. Maybe is an evolution in consciousness alongside this evolution in technology to help us understand what many traditions have said in more esoteric literature, that we have this power to become so much more than just what we're told we can become.
So just on that point, when we look at what is on the screen here, that it is possible to evolve into all of these qualities that are shown. Whatever the personality traits may be or personality structure may be, the enhanced capacity for love, the development of courage, the development of interpersonal skills, and many other things. There's just some things written here. Talent enhancement. Would you stipulate that it is possible to open these great qualities from within by transforming whatever personality trait pattern may exist?
Yes, I think that that's the magic of neuroplasticity. If I truly desire something,
Mm-hmm.
I can discipline myself to think about what it will be like to become that, to manifest that. So that's positive future mindedness, right? It's we can enhance certain skills, interpersonal skills, with people who could be role models of what it is we would like to become. If I want to be a great chef, right? Wouldn't it be great to know some chefs and to hang out with them and to talk with them? So there, all of these boxes here are ways in which, I mean, we as human beings are called the crown of creation. Why?
Yes. Right,
Because
exactly.
we have so much power. And as we know, it can be used for destruction. We're in a, what are they calling it? The existential stage of climate change.
Right, exactly.
Totally because of man. I mean, the antelopes and the buffalo didn't do this. Mankind did, right? So that sense of this enormous power that we have, if we can love ourselves, begin with the capacity to love yourself, box 2 up here, right?
Exactly.
And love ourselves in a way that we can see ourselves as almost unlimited potential.
Yes, exactly.
And accept this, where is it? The radical personal responsibility to say, I am going to design my life. And know that that's going to change and evolve with each new experience, with each refinement of personal responsibility and self-discipline to focus on the things that will build the foundation for the future I want to live in.
Yes, exactly. So it's very well said. And, you know, as I'm listening to what you're saying, one strand of thought that is really clear, at least in my mind, is that we can evolve from wherever we are.
Yes.
Whatever may have happened, whatever we may have done, not done, has happened to us, whatever we may have thought or felt, or situation we have gone through, whatever it is, the fact is we're alive right now. If we were not alive, this would not be our experience. We're alive. And hopefully we're in at least some level of health and some level of sound mind and body to even think about these things. So that's an assumption. Now, assuming that that's there, then we can progress further and not get bogged down by any pattern of personality. Although the pattern of personality may serve us. I mean, so just going back to the 5-factor model, these are the 5 points that are traditionally talked about in the 5-factor model of personality in the field of psychology. They are extroversion, neuroticism, openness to experience, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. These are the 5. So the traditional research, these 5-factor model, these 5 traits have been identified. And it's very interesting. You know, people will not go into depth in this right now, but the one thing that is very clear here is that in some of these traits, there is a movement away from oneself. In some of them, there is a moving very much internally within oneself, almost like an introversion versus extroversion. And then there is a sense of being open or sometimes being very closed. So it kind of really goes back to your ideas about expansion and contraction, that who we are, can we be in an expansive state where our personality actually evolves further rather than just being a fixated pattern that one is pretty much just stuck in?
Yes. Are you asking me if?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. So, yes, so I speak about energies. I try and discipline myself to speak about energies as expansion, as expanded energies or expanding energies versus contracting energies, because it helps to step out of some energies are really bad and some are really good. So that
Sure.
grasping after some and not after other. You know, energy's energy. It's what we do with it that makes
Yes,
it bad or good, the outcome.
definitely, definitely.
So my sense is, in this work of self-mastery, right? Of
Yeah,
a person who feels the pride of purpose in their life
yeah,
and the self-love that has expanded their own capacity to love others,
yes,
is someone who has been able to look at, where am I at a moment in time, and decide, this is not where I want to be, and this is not who I want to be.
yeah,
And has disciplined themselves to look at, what is it about my personality or myself as I show up in the world
yes,
that I want to change? What
exactly,
do I want to have more of it? Do I want to have less of it? And
exactly.
so that's a step of radical personal responsibility, to say,
Yes,
this is me as I see myself. Granted, others may see me differently, but this is my most honest assessment of myself. And I choose, I want more of this and less of that. Now, am I willing to do the work to make that happen? It's possible. The brain research says it's more than possible. It's probable. If you begin to monitor your thoughts and your behaviors in a way that you give yourself permission to choose thoughts and behaviors that will enhance the outcome you want in your life.
and see,
So,
that's one of the biggest questions. You know, what do we really want in life?
yeah,
And that might seem overly simplistic, but that's a very big question.
yes, yes. And I think that, who am I,
Yes,
in some ways leads us to that. Because
yes,
if I get to a point in my embracing of radical responsibility, and I set myself the challenge to acknowledge that every single thing that happens to me in my life, I am the only one that can change it, or can change the outcome of it, or can bring more or less of it into my own life. It means I now accept the power to change things in myself and in my life. And given that before we start doing this work, we're running off somebody else's paradigm of who we are and who we should be, you know, perhaps
yes,
in really good intentions. But, you know, a couple of generations ago, parents who were raised by parents who lived through the Depression have a very different relationship to money than parents who were raised by parents
yeah,
who grew up in the boom times, right? Where America is great, anything can happen in America. So they're going to raise their children in very different ways in very different worlds.
Right, right. Definitely.
And to just recognize, wow, first of all, what I think about the world is not necessarily what the world is. It's what I think about it. It's how I see it. And that changes from person to person. Any traffic cop who interviews the bystanders on a corner, the four corners of the scene of an accident, will tell you 4 different accidents happened based on different person's perspective, right? Not even talking about the people in the accident. They certainly think blame should be assessed in different ways for the most part.
Yes.
So
Yes.
to accept that and to say, okay, I'm going to start working with my own mind, my own thoughts in a way that lets me look and be aware of what I'm thinking and choose whether I want to feed that thought or shift it to a different thought.
Right, right.
We then become a very different kind of person, and we start nourishing different, what I'm going to call personality traits.
Definitely, definitely. It's almost as if an individual can awaken out of the conditioned personality.
Absolutely. I would say that perhaps at this stage in development, both development and technology, to know things on the subatomic level in some way, and the development of technology that has really put our planet in jeopardy,
Yes.
that we can now say, okay, there has to be an evolution in consciousness for us to go forward in the
Exactly.
kind of world we want for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren,
Right,
in
right.
perpetuity, right? This
Exactly.
beautiful, precious planet that's our home.
Oh, yes, yes, definitely, definitely. Because it's a massive realization for anyone to even become aware that the personality that they're holding, that personality is something that may not be who they actually are.
Absolutely. And this is such a profound moment of realization.
Yes.
Actually, I have taken on energies from the household within which I was raised.
Right, right.
So my mother's thoughts and feelings about the world and what it meant to be a girl in the world versus a boy in the world, my father's thoughts and feelings about all of those same things, and then perhaps different teachers or different spiritual leaders who, if our parents brought spirituality into the home and made it important. So there's this influence that kind of molded me as softer clay in my earlier years. Because in our earliest years, our brains are not populated enough to have any discernment whether what we're being told is accurate or inaccurate.
Right, exactly. Exactly. A thought really comes to my mind as we talk about conditioning and personality and trait development and all, that to actually go beyond or evolve beyond a personality pattern, whatever the pattern might be, whether it's a functional one, dysfunctional one, whether there's a disorder there, or there may not be any disorder, but there's the possibility of further evolution. It's to me that whatever the actual circumstance may be of any individual with regards to personality, that the further evolution is only possible if there is the existence of the personality pattern to begin with. If there's no existence of the personality pattern, how can one evolve beyond it?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like human beings come with personalities of one kind or another.
Yes, right, exactly. So the evolution further, would you say that it is a deliberate act, it's a deliberate choice to develop positive personality traits. That the individual can say, I can develop courage. I can enhance my interpersonal skills, as shown up here. I can cherish beauty. I can become more sensible about aesthetics. These are developments that can happen so that life becomes filled with fulfillment and joy.
Yes, my answer is a resounding yes. And I would say that this is a lifelong project for
Yes,
most people. And it is perhaps on its most basic level, the purpose of human existence. Because if we can evolve into a being who lives for the betterment of all,
yes,
just me, all. That means the squirrels and the planet itself. It means the ozone layer. It means the people I really love and like and the people I don't like so much. It means all. And this is an enormous task, but
yes,
I think it's the default mechanism in the human species because
yes,
at age 24 months, 2 years of age, toddlers all around the world from all different cultures
right.
and backgrounds show compassion to their
Exactly,
peers.
exactly.
So our mirror neurons in our brain are fully developed at that point and are giving us information that allows us to detect distress in the other. And
Yes,
the go-to response before it's conditioned out of us is
yes.
to assist. So I would say this is our core. The capacity for love is our core, that when our fear-based energies are controlled and we have enough to eat, we feel safe, we feel heard and valued, that automatically our responses have a quality of love in them.
Okay, so what would you say to people who believe, for various reasons, maybe because of religious reasons or because of just their perspective, that at the core, or as we are, our essential nature is not love or pure love or consciousness. It is a nature that is filled with disturbances and problems and all of that. And it is only God or some higher power that can actually bless us and remove that. But our essential nature is not that. Well, what is your take on that?
So my take on that is highly influenced by my education, training, and my choice of profession.
Okay.
I'm going to speak of it from that place, honoring other people's answers coming from a different place and perhaps
Yes.
very different input. My sense is to ask the person who espouses the views that you just enumerated, is to say, can you talk to me a bit about your early childhood home? Can you talk to me about some of the earliest messages you can remember hearing, either being told to you or being said around you about other people while you were present?
Right. Right.
And in an open, healthy, supportive atmosphere, all of us are able to start looking back. It's shocking how many people have no early childhood memories.
Yeah.
And psychologists will say, that's because it wasn't so great. So we pushed it way down in the unconscious. But they're
Right.
there somewhere. Those memories are there. And so that in itself is hugely illuminating, to actually reconnect with some memories of what it was like growing up in my childhood home. We might imagine that a child being born in a mother who's fleeing a war zone and then having the early experiences in a refugee camp with all of the difficulty that that entails, that early learning of who am I and what is the world about and how do I fit into the world would be very different than someone, say, born in a family who never worried about money.
So you're talking about the way a worldview is developed.
Yep, I am.
So there's a worldview that a person develops about the nature of the outside world and culture and all of that. But
yes.
It seems to me that there is a worldview about one's own inner world.
Yes, and that worldview about one's own inner world, I'm positing, is determined by what was said to us and how we were treated in our earliest years.
So are you saying that we can become meditatively aware of just that fact of how we were raised, how we were treated, what our early experiences are? Would you say something about that?
Yes, I would say that there are different approaches to that. One of them is meditation. Another one is working with a really good therapist.
Yes.
Who knows how to create a safe enough environment for the client to relax that unseen guard against bringing up things that were too painful, that
right.
they got
So
deeply repressed.
Do you think that could be done even without a therapist? Is there a way to do it just by oneself, by journaling, by looking within, by using the supports like what Angel Wing is providing, the groups that we have and all the tools that we're providing? Of course, somebody wants to go to a therapist and they are certainly free to do that, and we welcome that, no problem. But if someone doesn't go there or doesn't find that approach that is something that works, how would a person go about unraveling this themselves?
Well, I think they would start looking at what ways of expanding I'm going to say awareness, and eventually that becomes my body of information or knowledge about the world and myself. That we look at, okay, what is easier for you? What is more comfortable for you? What works for you? And then you start pursuing those avenues. And if you're diligent and if your goal is self-knowledge, to thine own self be true,
yes,
then what you need will show up for you. And if you love and trust yourself enough, you'll know, hey, this resonates for me. This is worth my time and energy. It's going to bear fruit for me. Because you see, because of neural networks, right? There's a way that I can talk metaphorically about, in some ways, neural networks in my brain, the very early ones, are the result of the way my mother thought, the way in which my father spoke to me and treated me, right?
Sure.
Oh, you're the brainy one, you're going to really do well in school, versus, oh yeah, you're the jolly one, you'll make a good garbage man someday. Two different messages, but
right, exactly. There's different messages, and then there's also the fact that children are brought up into a social hierarchy.
Yep.
There's an economic hierarchy, there is a class hierarchy. The whole world is a hierarchical world.
Yes, and so all of those energies, you see, our parents went through the same experience that we are, in terms of their parents programmed their earliest neural network.
Yes, exactly.
And one day I was playing with this with some other therapists, and we were thinking about, the influence that mothers had, because they were all women that were doing this. and we were thinking back, wow, this way in which I used to see myself and used to see the world is a product of my great 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 grandmother's experience of the world. How different is my world than that?
Exactly.
Now, so I really could benefit from the exploration of, okay, what do I really think about things? What do I think is an accurate view of the world that might in fact be an opinion versus truth with capital T, right? And if I could do that, perhaps then the next step or another step would be to say, wow, that's really what my father believed. But you know what? That's not me. I don't believe that. I was taught to believe that, but I really don't. I really think people are really good at their core, right? That just because somebody has a whole bunch of money doesn't mean they are dishonest and they got it through being dishonest, right? That
Right.
so and in that discernment between, wow, that's what my father thought, or oh my God, that's what my mother thought. I now have the ability to choose whether I want to continue to see myself in that way, to see
Exactly.
the world in that way.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's when we open up the magic of personal choice.
Well, exactly, because there are core constructs in personality psychology. These are constructed patterns. These are ideas that theoreticians and researchers have been studying, because it's a very big subject to study. And what's interesting in this is that, first of all, there is the sense of the self, the sense of the me that's there. And based on everything you've been saying so far, there is a great influence from culture, family, society in the development of that psychological sense of the self. Even though it can only develop in interconnection, it cannot develop without interconnection. The interesting aspect here is that that individualized sense of the me that is developed through interconnection. I want to ask you about that. Do you feel that that individualized self of the me that is developed, and then of course the personality that surrounds it, is it possible for it to develop from childhood into adolescence into young adulthood in such a way that these beautiful qualities that you see written on the screen actually are developing right along with that?
Yes, I think that when you look at, and this is an outsider looking in, some
Yes.
spiritual traditions, let's just say Tibetan Buddhist, right? They often will identify a very young child as a reincarnation of a famous, revered Buddhist
Yes.
master, scholar, whatever you want to call it,
Yes.
who has left their body. And so with a parent's permission, that child is taken then into the monastery.
Yes.
And given a very different experience of who am I and what is the world, versus perhaps a sibling, you know, from that same family who continues to be raised in the household.
Yes.
With a birth mother and father.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So as an individual realizes that, yes, self-mastery, one of the key principles of angel wing, has very much to do with first realizing the type of personality structure one is having, and then taking the further step to develop positive traits that they may already exist in one's personality, or they could be dormant, but they can be awakened further. So what specifically does a person do to awaken out of harmful personality traits or enhance good ones that are already there?
Well, there are huge sections in the bookstore of self-help books.
Yes, of course.
Which will give many exercises, many takes on this question. For me, I think that anybody listening to this is at a stage in their life that they're able to begin to contemplate, what does radical responsibility mean?
Yes, exactly.
Am I capable at this point in my life at looking at my life in a way that says, if I want to change anything, I can, because
Yes.
everything that's here is here because it belongs to me one way or another. I don't have to
Yes.
get so much into the past of why it belongs to me, but I can begin to look at, if it's here, I have the resources to deal with it.
Yes. Yes.
And then that begins that quest to bring more and more experience, which can then turn into facts or information that can then turn into knowledge, and ultimately will be the wisdom of self-mastery.
Right. And see, that's, I think you said the magic word there. The wisdom is perhaps, that is neuroplasticity. That is the growth within the brain.
Yes, yes, because it's not parroting back words that were said to me.
Yes.
It's
Exactly.
my embodied experience of over and over asking myself, who am I? Why am I here? Who am I? What is the purpose of my life?
Right, exactly, exactly. And to that effect, when we go through this, I just want to ask you, just if you just make a couple of comments about each of these boxes and kind of see where it goes. We talked about personality and positive trait development. That's box one. A second idea here is to explore the capacity for love. Could you make some just brief comments on that? And
yes.
How does a person begin to explore that?
Perhaps begin to explore it, thinking about what I'm going to say. And what I want to say at this moment is, our essential nature is divine love. And I say divine love to distinguish it from human love, because human love by its very nature is a give and take and conditional kind of love.
Sure, sure.
So, you know, if you ever hit me, I'm not going to love you anymore. I'm certainly not going to stay in a relationship with you. That's what I mean by conditional.
Yeah.
But this term divine love, as scary as it might sound to some people, is simply what I'm talking about that happens in 2-year-olds, toddlers, who, when they see another toddler in distress, if they're not starving, if they're not terrified, do you know what I mean? If they're not in a war zone, their immediate response is to go do something to help the other toddler out.
Exactly.
So that's what I mean by that. This is our core. And when we step into the field of inquiry about who am I, we come closer and closer to allowing ourselves to experience this level of love. Some people go as far as to say the life force is love.
Right, right. Okay, that's very good. Very good. Let's go to the next one. That's courage.
Courage. I mean, it takes, I don't know how you accept radical responsibility without courage, because it's so much easier to blame everybody and everything else for what's wrong in my life than it is to say, what am I going to do about it?
Right, right, right. Exactly.
It takes great courage to step up and say, okay, it's in my life. I'm going to work with it. I'm going to figure out how to make this better.
Right, exactly. Okay, the next one is the ability or the capacity to enhance interpersonal skills, which we all need, you know, so what would you say about that?
Oh, I just, looping back to something you said about I don't know, personality. We as humans, we live in relationship. You
Yeah.
know, in those early birth, pre-birth or birth years, right after birth, infancy,
Yes.
maybe even into toddlerhood to some extent, we can develop no sense of self unless somebody's reflecting something to us. So
Right.
we can't exist outside of interpersonal interactions.
Exactly. Exactly.
Whether we imagine them or whether they actually happen, we live in a connected world. So
Yes. And to enhance that, what is the best quality a person can aim to develop?
well, one that immediately comes to my mind is real listening.
Yeah.
Instead of the habit of the minute 3 or 4 words comes out of somebody's mouth to
Right.
already start thinking what I'm going to say back, but to be present with a mind that says, I truly want to know what you're saying to me.
Yeah.
I may or may not agree with it, but I honor your right to believe this particular thing and to express
Yes.
it. And I'm
And
very
that's,
interested.
yeah. And that's very powerful. I mean, to listen carefully is an act of tremendous respect.
It's an act of courage because I might hear something I don't like,
Sure.
and I might have to deal with an emotional reaction to it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So yes, it's an act of courage, and it's definitely an act of discipline.
Very good. Okay, the next one is the ability or the enhancement of aesthetic sensibility, you know, the cherishing of beauty. There's beauty in so many ways. Each person perhaps look at it in their own way. What do you want to say about this?
What I want to say about that is life is beautiful. As life manifests itself, it's beautiful. Some aspects of it are more challenging than others, but there's beauty in everything. And that it takes presence to recognize beauty.
Right, right.
I can remember at some point taking a course in art appreciation in college.
Yes.
And even though I'd been brought up with art all around me, I'm third generation of collectors, right? So whatever, objects of art all around me. I went into that class and I remember thinking, now they're going to teach me what real beauty is. Right. And then it took years to unlearn all that, not to unlearn it, to step outside of it and to truly embrace the phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And in
Yes.
order to be able to behold something, you have to be present to it, to let it move you, speak to you, affect you in some way, which means you're not listening to what your mind is yammering about it. Oh, that color isn't so great, or yeah, I don't like this form of art, or whatever, you know, that ceaseless monologue in our barely conscious mind is going on. But to just,
Exactly.
I'm here, I'm in front of this piece of art, and can I give myself permission to just let it speak to me and make my own decision of whether I consider this to be art or not?
Right,
So now
exactly.
we're talking about art as opposed to beauty. I'm sorry, I segued
No,
off
no,
that.
that's fine. It's all connected together.
Yes.
Nice. Okay, the next one is focusing one's energy and perseverance and self-development. You know, the ability to focus energy in a particular way.
So the
Yeah.
ability to focus energy in a certain way is to be able to make a clear and present choice. And
Yes.
before you can make a real informed choice, you
Yeah.
need to have disciplined your mind to be able to focus when you need to focus it, so that you are not distracted with whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Our brain's default mechanism is a hyperactive brain. Oh my God, what could go wrong now? Oh, that's not good. I don't like that. Oh, what's going to happen next? In the meanwhile, whatever it is I'm looking at
Yes.
or thinking about
Yeah.
is getting lost in all of this mishmash of thinking.
Right, right. Okay, very good, very good. The next one is embracing the power of forgiveness. So,
That's really beautiful, and something that requires real effort. I remember doing this work with a teacher who at one point said, as you do this work, you'll know you've hit a point of real, I don't know whether she used the word mastery or not, but of real progress when you understand the only person that you need to forgive is yourself.
right, definitely.
So as we look at a world that's filled with injustice, that phrase bears thinking about.
Exactly, exactly.
And it is so interesting how it's on this chart. It's totally and completely connected with number 2, explore the capacity for love.
Yes, right, right, right.
Self-love is sometimes the absolute hardest to come
Yes,
by.
definitely. All right. The next box is creativity and originality. So that is an interesting way of developing oneself further, enhancing the personality. What do you want to say about this?
Well, what I want to say about that is that's like, if you get a banana split, the cherry's like the best thing on
Yes,
top. I would say enhancing creativity and originality is the whipped cream.
yes,
That,
the whipped
that
cream.
the other stuff, a little further down, the banana and the different ice
Yeah.
creams, that stuff's really the nitty gritty. That's the exploring self-love. That's exploring forgiveness, right? Those things. However, enhancing creativity and originality requires that we actually value that enough that we discipline ourselves to create time in our schedules
Yeah,
to explore our own creativity and originality.
exactly, exactly. Very nice, beautiful. Positive future mindedness, the next box.
That one's beautiful and full of so many possibilities. There's a phrase called future memory,
Yeah.
and there's work called creating future memory. And it's all about the work of disciplining your mind to choose the thoughts and the imaginations and the creative endeavors that will lead us to an outcome that will happen in the future. But there's a great deal of mental discipline required in setting out a program to create positive future memories, but
Okay.
very well worth doing. It's
Yes,
mastery. That's mastery in action.
in action. Beautiful. Next one is talent enhancement.
I would say that when you do your work of self-love, this this is where you recognize, you begin to own that you have many, many, many good qualities, even exceptional qualities. Whether they're being fed and nurtured or not is a whole other thing. But this fearless inventory that we can take of ourselves, of who am I right now? What do I love and cherish and want more of? And what would I like to stop feeding and therefore have that the energy that's going into, say, the trait of jealousy. the energy that goes into being automatically, not even realizing it. Somebody, says, oh, such and such happened, and my great uncle bequeathed us $500,000. And
Yes.
that knee-jerk reaction that can say, you got a lot of money, why didn't he give it to me?
Right.
That sense of that, and to just recognize that that's there. It's not good or bad. It's something we learned in childhood, and we can choose to recognize when we're feeding it and when we're not, and what we want to replace it with if we're stop feeding it. And we literally break the neural connection in our brain and form a new connection by choosing not to feed jealousy, not to think I'm bad because I'm jealous, or jealousy's bad in and of itself. It's simply an energy. It's telling us something. Perhaps it's telling us, I need to work on this energy of unworthiness that I've got inside of me, that I think, oh, nobody would give me $500,000. Well, why? Right? And perhaps that can be further explored.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, number 11 is development of wisdom by a philosophical study. This is something interesting.
So I would say to you, if I created this, and I didn't, but I would say development of wisdom by embodying what you've learned.
Okay, so can you talk about that?
Well, when you decide to start looking at yourself and your life, and you decide to step up to radical responsibility to say, if I don't like things about my life, I have the power to change it. What do I need to do to change it? And then discipline myself to follow through with that.
Exactly.
The most core component of it is, what am I thinking?
So,
right?
would you say that reflecting on the big questions of life, that like as philosophers do, that has an impact on the mind?
It does. And having studied, at least as an undergraduate, I took every philosophy course my university offered. It was a small enough university that I could handle that without being a philosophy major. But I would say that can get very weighty and wordy.
Yes.
And the danger is, I think I'm doing something great because I'm reading Immanuel Kant.
Right, exactly.
And really, that's not my cup of tea, so it's a waste of my time and energy. And it's actually not being respectful to the way I can embody wisdom. So, but philosophical study, you see, I think all of the roads to wisdom are the result of the heritage that we have of great minds thinking about these questions.
Yes,
so perhaps there's a great deal of philosophical study that's gone into the simple technique of, my mind is nuts right now. It's making me feel really bad, uneasy, jumpy. I'm going to mindfully focus on my breath. Seemingly very simple, very common sense, very whatever. But think of all the Western sciences that's gone into that. Think of all the great thinkers throughout the history of mankind from so many different traditions.
So it's very interesting, because it's potentially possible you may have individuals who may have a lot of depth intellectually with philosophical study, but they may not have wisdom. And you may have people.
Oh, yeah, I would say so. Accumulating a lot of factual information is a great way to step away from taking responsibility for your own life and your own thoughts.
Exactly.
It's a great diversion.
So what would you say about just the reflection on self-development, maybe not like very deep philosophically, but just to have curiosity about the self. Who am I? How can I improve?
Absolutely. I think that's the core of everything we're talking about here.
Yes, yes.
To value myself enough to explore who am I.
Exactly.
Not who have I been told I was, or
Right.
who I should be, but who am I from the inside out?
Which is very much experiential rather than an intellectual conclusion.
Yes,
But
yes.
what happens in philosophy. So that's the limitation of it.
Yes. However, there have been a couple of books that I've read in my life that I could embody it. Do you know what I mean? Some part of the message resonated so powerfully in me
Right,
that
exactly.
it just became part of how I know the world and how I know myself. Maybe I don't even remember the name of the author of the book, but it was said in a way that it rang true for me.
Very true. Okay, very good. Let's go to the next one. Civic virtues and better citizenship. How is this impacted as we're developing further?
What I, earlier, I don't remember, interpersonal skills. That was the box that I said, we can only know ourselves in interaction.
Right.
So we're a gregarious or we're a herd species. It's very unusual to live in a cloistered monastery or, a hermit in a cave in the Himalayas somewhere. Most of us on some level crave human interaction because that's how we have a sense of who we are, is how others are responding to us.
Right, definitely.
So in this process of what we've been talking about, now we're on the next to the last box. Part of what happens, I think, is we realize we're all interconnected. This pandemic has shown us that in a way that cannot be denied.
Cannot be denied.
And in that sense of loving myself enough that I know I'm worthy of a good life, I know I'm worthy of being respected and treated with kindness, and I do respect myself and I am kind to myself, it immediately, it's the logical conclusion is, of course I would give this to my fellow beings.
Right, definitely.
Right? Yeah. I of course, there's an old saying in the healthcare professions, you can't give any better care to someone else than you give to yourself.
Right, exactly.
So if you always put off loving yourself and taking responsibility for yourself, you're going to burn out, and then you're not good to anybody else.
In the last box, there's a bunch of stuff kind of summarized in there. Radical personal responsibility, the power of altruism, energy and tolerance, work ethic development, nurturing each aspect of one's life. There's so many things that's like a summary, that has many good qualities in there. Anything you want to say about that?
Well, I would just say radical responsibility includes all of that and
all
more.
of them. All of that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Well, Dr. Elizabeth Berman, thank you very much for this extended podcast. Please do visit, this is a message for the listeners to visit theangelwing.com, which is our website. And if you have any questions or comments or feedback, please do send us an email or give us a call. We will get in touch with you, and we wish you all well. And once again, thank you to Dr. Elizabeth Berman for such a wonderful exposition on some of the areas about positive psychology and personality trait development. Thank you, Dr. Berman.
Oh, thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
All right, here we go. Okay, beautiful job.
Great. You put that together in a really wonderful way, Sasha.
Well, you did it. I mean, I just put the ideas were there, and I just wanted to ask you about it. And you saw the wisdom is there already within you, so it just comes out beautifully. So
thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
so then we'll meet on Wednesday at 6:50.
Yes, good.
All right, sounds good. We'll continue from there.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Okay. See you then. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.